Good evening and thanks for tuning in to Double Trouble on CTV Sports. I'm Rachel Vigil.
And I'm Tyler Patterson, here filling in for Grace Reeder.
And before we start our show today, we would like to send our deepest sympathies to the family of Savannah McNeely. On Thursday, we learned that one of the victims of a shooting that occurred off campus was a member of our Rocky Mountain student media team. We are deeply saddened by this news, and Savannah will forever be remembered in our newsroom.
The CSU football team closed out a nail-biting game Friday night against New Mexico, winning with a final score of 27-24. The Rams continue to be the first in Mountain West Division with undefeated conference play, and the Rams officially became bowl eligible. Rachel, what are the big takeaways away from this game?
You know, I think it really hurt that we lost Jamal Hicks, our safety. He has a broken arm, but he did come out today and say that surgery went well, so that's awesome to hear. But I do think that really hurts our defense, especially going up against Air Force this week.
Definitely, and our defense has been struggling as of late, and so I think CSU is going to have to lean on their offense and the quarterback play of Nick Stevens, who's been playing phenomenal for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So, and I also think that CSU is loaded on offense, and you need to look to guys like Olabisi Johnson and Izzy Matthews, who showed out big on Friday night against New Mexico. Yeah,
you had said that Michael Gallup had one of his worst games of the season. Not saying it was bad by any means, but it's great that we have enough depth in our offense to come out and still be able to pull off a win. So that's really great to see. But there has been a lot of noise surrounding the Rams and their 4-0 record in conference play. But for head coach Mike Bobo, it's important for them to keep focusing on the game in front of them.
You know, only a handful of teams in the country that are good enough to go out there and just win every week. Everybody else you watch, it's dogfight every week. Dogfight. I know we'd like to go out there and blow everybody out, but that's not realistic. I mean, it's going to be a dogfight this week, and we're going to have to play one of our best games to win this ball game.
Mike. The CSU Rams volleyball team also played a close match against New Mexico on Saturday night. The Rams found themselves down 2 sets, but fought back to win the 5th, remaining undefeated in Mountain West play. 4 different Rams had double-digit kills in this match, including freshman Brianna Reynolds and senior Jasmine Hanna. Last week, Rachel, you and Grace talked about how you thought this was going to be an easy sweep. So what happened down there in New Mexico?
You know, it really hurt that we lost the first 2 sets against them, but we were able to come back, which was great, and win the last 3 sets. But, I mean, CSU's only given up 4 sets in Mountain West play all year. So I think that just tells you a lot about the CSU volleyball team, which is really great to see. And, of course, Tom Hilmer always sends a great team in to play no matter what. He definitely prepares them. You know, he is just killer, and I'm so happy he's our coach of our volleyball team. And, well, we will not go anywhere because we are going to talk about soccer, golf, swimming, and CSU basketball when we get back. And can you believe that the soccer season is almost coming to an end? On Sunday, the CSU soccer team played their last away game of the season against San Diego State, losing 3-0. The Rams head into their last game 4-9-5, and they will be playing Wyoming at home. And Tyler, you've been following the soccer team all season long. Tell us what you think they need to improve on next year.
Well, CSU women's soccer has went into a season high 8 overtime games, which is pretty insane for a soccer team. So they're a young squad, and I think next season they'll be able to capitalize on some of the games that they've lost closely this season. So.
They're also a very young team that you were saying earlier, so hopefully that they'll be able to mature a little bit and get a little bit more chemistry to go along with that as well.
Yeah, the experience that they earn this season will definitely help them going into the future. Mm-hmm. The CSU women's golf team finished up day 2 of the Las Vegas Collegiate Showdown today, led by Katrina Pendergrass and Haley Greb, a freshman. The contest includes 17 teams, and the Rams will finish up play tomorrow.
CSU swimming and diving held its first home meet Saturday against Denver. DU ended up victorious. The Rams were only able to edge out the Pioneers in 5 individual events and both the 1 and 3 meter dives. The Rams swimming and diving team will head to Wyoming next. And as you can now see, Ram fans, we are joined by Eddie from the Collegiate, and we are here to talk about CSU basketball. How excited are you guys?
Pretty excited for the season. So the Rams were picked to finish 5th in the conference. If you remember last year, the Rams were picked to finish 7th, and then they ended up finishing 2nd, only a couple buckets away from a Mountain West championship. So I don't think the low expectations are anything that's going to get this team down. But at the same time, I think there are reasons that after finishing 2nd and having such a successful year that they haven't been given very high expectations. First thing you got to think about is the losses of Gian Clavel and Emmanuel Amagbo. 2 of the best players in the conference, if not the 2 best players. They combined for 46% of the Rams scoring, 44% of the rebounding. So they basically did it all. In addition to that, some of the guys who were going to help compensate for those losses, Kevin Little, Devakio Butler, Kevin Dorsey, Kamani Jackson, all transferred. So Tyson is also out for the season with an injury. So
Yeah.
they might have a little more trouble than anticipated having to deal with the loss of those two players. But I still think they will have a chance to put together a pretty solid season.
So who are you looking for CSU to step up and fill those shoes of John Clavel and Amagbo?
And like I was saying, I think Prentice Nixon, J.D. Page, and Nico Carvacho are now the go-to guys. Emphasis on Page and Nixon. I mean, they averaged 13 and 9 points respectively last season, and they've really been conditioned to step into a bigger role, and now there's been high expectations from them from the start coming in, and now they really have a chance to do what they came here to do, and that's lead the Rams.
And you can't forget Deion James, who's JUCO Player of the Year, too. He's going to be huge to help out with Nico.
Absolutely.
But it is going to be an interesting season. But I think it's very interesting that Prentice Nixon or JD didn't get an all-Mountain West team position at all. And I find that very interesting, although they were honorable mentions with Carvacho. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say it's a little surprising for me, kind of like what I was saying. I think this season is the season Nixon and Page are going to play to their full potential and do what they came here to do. So I think it's the kind of thing, assuming they don't transfer after this season, that if they put together impressive seasons playing around 40 minutes a game, then they'll be on that list next year. I don't think it's anything to get down about.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people have been talking about CSU as a stepping stone college, which is very interesting, but I don't see any of those guys leaving. I feel like they're all such a close-knit bond group of guys. I just can't see them wanting to transfer and go to a bigger name. What do you guys think?
I think if there was a chance that two of those guys we just mentioned, like Nixon or Page, were to transfer, it would have been before this season, because this is kind of the season where there's the biggest question since they've been here on who's going to do what, and they're kind of going to have to do the most to find their role as a team. So I think if they were to transfer, it would have been before this. If they're here now, they're here to stay. They want to lead this team. They want to be the face of the Rams.
Good point, good point. But I also think it's very exciting that they're going to do a hurricane game. I mean, with all the hurricanes and all the natural disasters that have been happening, it's really nice to see CSU step up. And hopefully on November 5th, they're able to play a game. Will you guys be in attendance for it? Yes, no?
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, good. I will hopefully be there as well.
Hello, sports fans. This is the FOCO Sports Show. I am your host, Tim McCall, and alongside me, I have some members of the Rocky Mountain Student Media. We're going to talk some sports. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Brian Buck from KCSU.
I'm Eddie Harris with the Rocky Mountain Collegian.
And I'm Nick Baker from KCSU.
So we're going to start off today with one of the more important topics on this show. We're going to talk CSU football. Now, the last couple weeks, we did escape with a victory. The Rams escaped with a victory, but only a one-possession victory against New Mexico this past Friday. Only one possession against Nevada last week. Is there any reason to be worried if you're a Rams fan right now?
I really don't think so. When you look at these two games, they're not the games that are circled on the schedule. And as much as you don't want to see it happen as a fan, you have young kids who are circling Boise State, who are circling Air Force. That last year was a tough loss at Air Force. They want to play this game. They want to play the Boise State game. They want to play the Wyoming game and get revenge for Wyoming last week. They weren't circling Nevada. They weren't circling New Mexico. And you could tell they didn't necessarily come out with the same energy that they came out with the last 2 weeks. One of the things I look at that I actually think is a positive about the New Mexico game is in Nevada, you had, as a performance, kind of a stale cake. The cake got baked, it got left out for a day, and you threw a bunch of Michael Gallup performance icing on top of it, and you're like, no, the cake's still pretty good. But really it wasn't. In New Mexico, there's no icing. There's a couple sprinkles. Izzy had 112 yards. That's a good performance. The defense had a takeaway, and we were positive in the turnover margin. That's a positive. Some more sprinkles. But you don't have icing everywhere to make the cake taste better. I think this week specifically was a real gut check, reality check on the offense, on the defense, who allowed a score in every single quarter and really couldn't get a stop when they needed to. I think this is the lights in your face that say, hey, you really got to watch what you're doing. Last week, there were too many good things that allowed us to say, it's fine, it's just one game.
I think there are positives surrounding the fact they were able to get a win without Gallup performing, though. He had 58 yards against New Mexico. That was his worst statistical performance of the season. The Rams were 1-2 in games that he had under 100 receiving yards going into this week, so they were able to win without Gallup taking over. I mean, they would not have beat Nevada without Gallup's ridiculous performance. B.C. Johnson had 77 and a touchdown, so I think there was a little more balance in the receiving game. But yeah, I mean, You're going to take the 4-0 start to Mountain West play, like you said. You have to take that. But I think if you play like this against teams that you said are circled on their schedule, like Wyoming and Boise State, you're probably not going to come out with a victory. In the Nevada game, I looked to the defense, which completely collapsed. I mean, they allowed Nevada to get almost 600 all-purpose yards, a team that only averages under 400. They scored 42 points, a team that struggles to score the ball frequently. The defense was a question mark going into the season. You did see them fall apart a little bit in those games, but like you said, they're not games that are circled on their schedule. They're younger players. This is a natural thing that's going to happen. I don't think you have a reason to worry yet because, like we said, they did win the games.
Yeah, going back to one thing you said, how you don't want to see them perform like this against better opponents. One thing I do take positively when we look at the better opponents is they've won 2 really close games in back-to-back weeks.
Absolutely.
We know that they know how to play in close games. When we look at a similar situation, the basketball team last year, would they lose 4 games by 1 score in like a 5 or 6 game stretch?
Couldn't beat Boise State.
Exactly. This year for the football team, it's kind of the flip. I have confidence that playing Boise State, playing at Wyoming, these guys know how to win a late game.
Absolutely.
You're completely right. And they had an opportunity to win without Gallup. Like you said, it was really, it freaked me out mostly the Nevada game because it was, you take Michael Gallup out of that, you replace him with any average receiver, and CSU was crushed in that Nevada game.
Absolutely.
And for them to come back and win a game really without Michael Gallup contributions against New Mexico was huge for me because I didn't want them to get too New York Giantsy because look what happens when they don't have their receiver. They're bad. And you know, they learned to get production other places, and like you said, BC, that was the big thing for me because BC was an accent piece that needed to be there for CSU to win these big games, and he came back. He was so disappointing the last couple of weeks, but he came back.
There's going to be more pressure on this team naturally if they don't feel like they can win when Gallup isn't going off.
Right.
And someone will shut him down. So for this to happen and they can really solidify in their minds that they can win without him doing well and they can step up otherwise, I mean, that's a huge thing for them moving forward. Absolutely.
It's a huge confidence piece.
It really is.
Now, one thing I think a lot of people haven't mentioned yet is, you know, this Rams team was kind of out of their schedule. This was a Friday night game against New Mexico, and, you know, they had to drive down. I believe they went down on Thursday. You know, they kind of really screwed up the whole team's schedule. Not that that's an excuse, you know, I'm not trying to make excuses for the team, but it does make it a little bit more difficult to play, more difficult to be consistent. You know, we have to remember, this isn't an NFL team. These are college kids, you know. There's going to be some weeks where they're just not on top of their game, and I think on a game that took place on Friday, if you're able to kind of go about that funky schedule and still escape with a victory, you got to be happy with it.
Absolutely. And if they didn't have a game against Hawaii earlier in the season, which presented a similar obstacle, I mean, you have a long travel, you have a time change, you're playing at a way different time than you normally do. They may not have been as well prepared for the flipped kind of schedule against New Mexico playing on Friday. So the Hawaii game actually could have factored into the win in that sense.
Yeah.
No, we're going to continue with football. We're going to move on to the NFL. We're going to stay in Colorado. We're going to talk about the Broncos. They were shut out 21-0 by the Chargers yesterday. It was a difficult one to watch. So now I got to ask you guys, if you're a Broncos fan, is it time to hit the panic button?
For me, it was time to hit the panic button the second they hired Vance Joseph, because if you think about it, like all of the units, offensive, defensively, throughout the league, why would you say I really like last year's Dolphins defense? They were the definition of average, and they brought in Vance Joseph, and every single decision he made afterwards, I questioned a lot. You know, everyone put all this faith into Trevor Siemian, and he's not really that great unless you have a lot of weapons around him. And we saw primarily this week, no Emmanuel Sanders. That means Thomas isn't effective anymore, and there is no other weapons on the Broncos offense.
I disagree. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button. I think it's pretty black and white what the solution is. Running the football. You don't have Emmanuel Sanders
It didn't
anymore.
work this week.
That's the
Against
thing.
the Chargers.
Well, it did a little bit. C.J. Anderson only had 10 carries for 44 yards. 4.5 in the NFL a carry. That's not bad. In the last 2 weeks, C.J. Anderson only has 19 carries. Trevor Siemian has 85 passing attempts in those same 2 weeks.
Rough.
That's pretty black and white.
It's because they're down the whole time.
But in the NFL, you can't establish yourself and play consistently if you don't have a good running game. Look at what the Giants are doing. They turned it around against the Broncos because they finally were like, oh, right, we need to run the football to actually have consistency on offense. And the Broncos need to get back to that. C.J. Anderson's not a bad running back. This offensive line might be weak, but they're not necessarily a bad rushing offensive line. I think they're a worse pass-blocking offensive line for sure. So why are we throwing the ball so much? I think it's really just a simple concept of call plays better.
I think it's a concept of we're down and we can't run the ball. because we're down 3 scores to the Chargers.
If you're down, you're down. You have to run the ball. Like, there's a point where you say, we have Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. We have to throw the ball, like Drew Brees, to keep up with them. There's another point where you say, we've been throwing the ball and it hasn't been working. We might be down by 3 scores, but we should probably try and run the ball because passing the ball definitely.
But define the panic button. Are you saying the panic button should be hit when they realize they're not going to make the playoffs? Because if that's so, I'd say the Broncos have to hit it. I mean, they're 3-3. You have a surging Chiefs team despite two straight losses.
Yeah, and after that Chiefs game, it doesn't get any easier. You're going to Kansas City, you're going to Philadelphia, and then you get to come back home, and guess who's coming? The Patriots.
Their schedule's
you got 3 rough games ahead of you. This is the worst time for the Broncos to be slumping. And, quite honestly, I don't see them getting out of those 3 games with any wins.
I don't see them getting to 500 in the season.
I don't know about that, but there's absolutely no excuse. I know the Chargers and the Giants might not be as bad as their record, but those are 2 golden opportunities. You should not lose one of those games, and definitely not 2. Maybe if they split it, it's different, but I really think it's going to be tough for this team to make the playoffs. The Raiders are finally putting it together a little bit, too.
The Chargers are putting it together.
You have to temper your expectations as a Bronco fan, though. When you look at how the Chiefs are playing, when you look at how the Raiders came into the season and the talent that they realistically have, if you were expecting a Broncos team to win the division or make the playoffs consistently, I think you had the wrong idea about this team. You have a first-year head coach, a young quarterback, a defense that is good and showed that they can play against the rush, but has some holes so far in it, and you also have an offense that, Nick, like you said, doesn't have a ton of weapons. Tempered expectations is what the Broncos need to have this season. And right now, I still think 8-8 is a realistic possibility, and that's not a bad season for when you look at the roster of the Broncos. It's pretty simple to say, you don't have to hit the panic button. Maybe just tweak a few things here and there.
And you have to remember they were anticipated to be a 7-9 win team who would hover around 500 with their defense carrying them and not a lot of offense. That's what you've seen. So I think when they started off so hot, 3-1, you kind of change your expectations when you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Them being 3-3 right now is where you expected going into the season.
Yeah.
It really is. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And when you look at the 2 teams they've faced in the last 2 weeks and how they've played them and how the Broncos won in those first 4 weeks, they were playing really, really good rush defense.
Exactly.
And then they started to game plan for teams that don't really run the ball very well, especially the Giants, and kind of caught them off guard.
Absolutely.
That's an upset. It happens in the NFL. The NFL is extremely inconsistent in games like that. And you had to know that the New York Giants were going to win a football game eventually. The Chargers is rough, but at the same time, the Chargers almost beat us in Denver in week 1. And then you have to know that the Chargers are saying, we really want this win. We're at home. We haven't won in LA yet. It's a big game for the Chargers, probably bigger than Broncos fans
The Chargers
realize.
also have been playing close games since last season. You can't look at their record. That's a team that blew an absurd amount of fourth quarter leads. I know that's embarrassing, but at the end of the day, the Chargers do compete. They're going to come out with wins.
Early in the season, they're a kicker away from winning a couple games to start the year.
Exactly.
Really, they're a better team than a lot of people realize.
They really have been the last couple of years, absolutely.
Now, I want to move on from here, guys. We're going to talk about another sport. Big news coming up. The World Series starts tomorrow. We're going to have the Houston Astros visiting the Los Angeles Dodgers for Game 1 tomorrow night. It's going to be a 7-game series. Who you guys got?
As a Cubs fan, I love the Astros because they're kind of a mirror image of the Cubs in the AL. They both started a huge rebuilding process in 2012, surrounding themselves with a core of young hitting with some pitching too, and have finally put it together. The Astros are a fun team to watch. The talent in that lineup hitting-wise is incredible given how young they are, but at the same time, I don't see how you're going to get past a team like the Dodgers. They already proved to me they can get past the NLCS. The pitching, top to bottom, from the rotation to the bullpen, is absurd. It took the Cubs over 6 innings to get a hit off of their bullpen in the NLCS, and that's not a poor hitting team in the Chicago Cubs. I don't think the Astros have the pitching to match up with the Dodgers, even though the Astros pitching has been decent. Charlie Morton's a guy I look to. His ERA has been 6.23 in the postseason. He's been shaky. The Dodgers will exploit that with how good their pitching is.
I agree with you in everything that you said. The Dodgers are a great team.
Yeah.
They're very capable. They have a great pitching staff. But the smallest reason in the whole world why the Astros are going to win the game plays second base.
Yeah.
He had
Altuve.
an amazing ALCS. He's a stellar player. If you consider the postseason, he deserves MVP for the year. There are so many pieces just about the middle of their infield and accent players from there that say this Astros team is going to be tough to beat. Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa might be the best middle infield in the history.
Correa has been a little cold in the playoffs. He's great, don't get me wrong, but he has been.
And
He's hit
this
a couple
is the time
nice-
for him to
nice
get hot.
bombs, though.
There are a lot of people on the Astros team that have been cold in the playoffs compared to what they are. George Springer's been a little bit cold. A lot of those bats that they have in the middle of the order, 6, 7, 8, Marwin Gonzalez is a name that comes to mind. Evan Gattis, another guy. They haven't necessarily been the power bats that just pop off at any time that they normally are in this playoffs. I expect them to bust out for at least 1 or 2 games there. You can let Altuve, you can let the pitching. Justin Verlander's been insane since he went to the Astros. Those guys are going to get it done.
I mean, that's a good point. They still have scored the 3rd most runs out of all postseason teams. They haven't really hit yet. You saw what happens when they don't hit. They scored 5 runs over 3 games against the Yankees and lost all those 3 games on the road. That's what can happen. But like you said, they've still been winning, and they haven't even fully started hitting yet. I think it's going to be a 7-game series regardless.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're running low on time. Like you guys, I also have the Astros winning this World Series. I think it's going to be a great one. We'll see you next week. That's all we have for the FOCO Sports Show tonight. I'm your host, Tim McCall. Have a good one.
Hello and welcome back from the break. I'm Haley Neuendorf filling in for Alex Clow. The Colorado State football team recorded another win last weekend against New Mexico to improve their record to 4-0. The Rams beat the Lobos 27-24. This win also means the team is now eligible for a bowl. Senior QB Nick Stevens passed for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. This game also marked his 4th without an interception. Standout Michael Gallup is still the #1 spot in the nation for receiving yards, even though he had somewhat of a shy performance at New Mexico with only 58 yards on 6 catches. Most of CSU's yardage came on the ground. Running back Izzy Matthews rushed for 116 yards and a touchdown on 21 carries. Dalen Dawkins also rushed for 71 yards on 12 carries. On the defensive side, Colorado State's Josh Watson led the team with 9 tackles. Sophomore Max McDonald also recorded 6 tackles. Looking ahead to this weekend, the team comes home for the big rivalry game against Air Force at 1 p.m., and it will be aired on the CBS Sports Network. The Colorado State volleyball team continues to be on fire. The team improved their perfect record to 10-0 in conference play on Saturday against New Mexico. But this match was not off to a great start, as CSU was behind 2-0, but the team came back and to win the next 3 sets. Brianna Reynolds led CSU with 20 kills and Jasmine Hanna added 16. Katie Olkelsak had a double-double with 58 assists and 12 digs. This team is just underway here at Moby Arena facing Wyoming for the annual Border War. For updates on this match, follow the CTV11 YouTube page. The Colorado State soccer team is sitting in the 10th spot in the Mountain West out of 12 schools. The team did not have a great weekend with 2 losses. The first 4-2 loss was at New Mexico. Kaylee Lordman and Janelle Stone got the pair of goals for CSU, but it was not enough. On Sunday, the team had a 3-0 loss against San Diego State in the 95-degree weather. SDSU put up 17 shots compared to CSU's 7. The team will play their final match of the season this Friday at 1 p.m. against Wyoming for the annual Border War. We've seen the CSU student section slowly dwindle after halftime at most sporting events here, and it has drawn some attention.
Wow, and I came out here to the CSU Plaza to test students on their Colorado State sports knowledge. What is the Colorado State football record right now?
Nope, don't know it.
Can you name one Colorado State men's basketball player?
No.
Can you name one CSU women's basketball player?
You know, to be honest with you, I can't.
Who is the Colorado State quarterback?
Dude, I don't even know, man. I don't even know.
What conference is CSU in?
Division II.
What conference is CSU in?
The Mountain Conference.
Ooh, Mountain West, but you're close. Who is the Colorado State football quarterback?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Who is the Colorado State football team playing this weekend?
I couldn't tell you, but I know the hockey team's playing Arizona and Arizona State.
Fair enough. Who is the head Colorado State men's basketball coach?
Oh God, I have no clue.
Who is the Colorado State football team playing this weekend?
Ooh, why am I forgetting this? Air Force. Is that next?
It's close. New Mexico. Can you name one CSU football player?
No, actually I can't.
Gallup. Oh, ding ding. Yeah. Gallup. Who is the Colorado State men's football coach?
Mike Bobo. Right?
Killing it.
I think it's safe to say CSU students need to work on their sports knowledge. For updates on the sporting events this weekend, follow the CTV11 YouTube page and don't go away because Kiara Coles is up next with entertainment and has an inside look at the CSU drag show from this weekend.
Welcome back. I'm Tyler Patterson, here to catch you up on all the latest in Colorado State athletics. CSU football traveled to Albuquerque, New Mexico last Friday night to take on the New Mexico Lobos in a conference matchup, and the Rams clinched bowl eligibility with a 27-24 win. New Mexico scored the first touchdown of the contest, but CSU senior tight end Dalton Fackrell tied the game at 7-7 midway through the second quarter with his fourth touchdown in as many games. CSU wide receiver Olabisi Johnson caught his first touchdown of the season in the second quarter, extending the Rams' lead to 14-7. Izzy Matthews then scored a rushing touchdown with 17 seconds left in the first half, giving CSU a 21-10 halftime lead. The Lobos cut CSU's lead to 21-17 on their second possession of the third quarter, but a pair of Wyatt Bryan field goals from 40 and 51 yards in the fourth quarter gave the Rams a big enough cushion to secure the victory. The win Friday night marks the fifth consecutive season that the Rams have earned bowl eligibility, including all 3 seasons under Mike Bobo. The Rams have yet to win a bowl game during Bobo's tenure, but things are looking positive for CSU with 4 games left on the schedule. CSU quarterback Nick Stevens helped propel the Rams to their 4th straight Mountain West win with another solid passing performance. Stevens finished 17 of 33 for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stevens has now gone 4 straight games without an interception. Junior Olabisi Johnson led the Rams in receiving with 5 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown, his first of the season. The nation's leading receiver Michael Gallup had his lowest receiving total of the season, posting just 6 catches for 58 yards in the contest. Although CSU was able to stay balanced on offense as running back Izzy Matthews reached the 100-yard mark for the first time this season, finishing with 116 yards and a touchdown on 21 carries. Dalen Dawkins also contributed a modest 71 rushing yards on 12 carries. CSU will return home this Saturday to take on the Air Force Falcons at 1 p.m., and that game will air nationally here on CBS. Women's volleyball added 2 more wins to their season total over the weekend, defeating New Mexico 3-2 on the road last Saturday night. The Rams were down 0-2 but rallied back to reverse sweep the Lobos in 5 sets. CSU was led by the redshirt freshman phenom Brianna Runnels, who recorded 20 kills, surpassing her previous high of 19. Jasmine Hanna also recorded 16 kills, while Sonia Cheesmich and Paulina Hogard-Jensen posted 12 and 11 kills respectively. The second win for the Rams came against Wyoming Tuesday night in the traditional border war. CSU entered the match against Wyoming with a number 20 national ranking and a flawless Mountain West Conference record of 10-0. Amazingly, the Rams have only lost a total of 4 sets in conference action this season. Wyoming was able to steal the first set against CSU after trailing 19-22. The Cowgirls managed a 6-0 run in that first set, closing out the Rams 25-22 in the first. CSU quickly turned things around in the second set, building a 17-11 lead, not allowing Wyoming to come within 5 points. CSU went on to win the third and fourth sets 25-21 and 25-16, closing out the Cowgirls 3-1 in the match. The win last night marks CSU's 11th straight victory, all against conference opponents. Tom Hilbert seemed content with his team's poise in the match as the Rams kept calm after losing the first set, saying, quote, "We had some new things that happened tonight that were kind of fun. Our team competed well with the exception of the 6-point run in the first set, but I think that might have fueled our team a little bit for the rest of the match. Every time Wyoming made a charge, we had an answer." CSU is hosting conference opponent Air Force tonight. The current score is CSU 14-8 in the first set. Women's soccer traveled to San Diego State on Sunday and landed themselves a tough 3-0 loss in their final road game of the season. The Rams finished the game with 7 shots, 4 of which were on goal. Unfortunately, nothing dropped for CSU, and their record now moves to 4-9-5 overall. Coach Bill Hempen spoke to the team's 3-0 loss, saying, quote, "We fought and gave up 3 goals, 3 good goals. In some cases, they could have been preventable. They weren't goalkeeper error. Certainly, we're a good enough team, but we were chasing the game and weren't able to hold on to the ball much. When we did have it, we tried to make the killer pass, but just couldn't, and not for a lack of effort. It just wasn't to be today." CSU will host Wyoming tomorrow at 1 p.m. on the new CSU women's soccer field. This is the last match of the 2017 season, so make sure you get out there and show your support.